All right, so what we're going to be doing today is that we're going to be talking about a sample space. Now, what a sample space is that it describes all of the possible outcomes of an event. So with a sample space, we're taking a look at what are the options that we can have based on an event. So let's take a look at our very first example. The New England Patriots and the Dallas Cowboys are playing. What are the possible outcomes of the game? So for those of you who don't know, the New England Patriots and the Dallas Cowboys are football teams. If those two are playing, what could happen in the end? Either the Patriots are going to win or the Cowboys are going to win. Those are pretty much what your options are. So your sample space for this situation is that the Patriots win or the Cowboys are going to win. Before you start saying that they're going to tie, have you ever seen a football game that actually ties? One of them is going to win in the end. The next one is that a number cube is rolled. So what are the possible outcomes? So for those of you who don't remember, this is a number cubed. And if you guys notice, here are the possible outcomes that you could have. You could either get a 1, you can either get a 2, you can get a 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's pretty much all the outcomes that you can get when you start rolling a die. So sample space can be displayed. So it's like visuals. So a sample space can be displayed with either a list, table, or a tree diagram to determine the probability of a compound event. So what a compound event is what happens if you get a certain event that happens, and then based off that event, what's going to happen after that. All right, so let's take a look at these two examples here so I can show you guys what the difference is between a list or a table versus a tree diagram. So for number 1, it says for breakfast, Jamie can choose between cereal, eggs, or a muffin. She can also drink coffee, orange juice, or milk. So what are the possible outcomes that we can get, and how many of those do we have? So let's start off with the first couple of options that we have. So she can either do cereal, eggs, or muffin. Now with these 3, she can either get coffee, orange juice, or milk. So the way that we want to do a list is that we want to take a look at what our very first option is. So we're going to stick with cereal. So I'm going to write cereal right here. Now with the cereal, she can either get coffee with it. So that's one outcome that we can have. Going back to cereal, she can get also an orange juice. This is another outcome that we can have here. And again, going back, she could either have cereal and then she could have milk. So right now, those are all the options that we can have for cereal. Cereal and coffee, cereal and orange juice, cereal and milk. Moving on, we have eggs next. So what happens if you want eggs instead? You can have eggs with coffee. You can have eggs with orange juice. I'm gonna put OJ. Or you can have eggs with milk. So those are the outcomes that you could have if you choose eggs. And the last one is what happens if you want a muffin instead. Again, with a muffin, you can get a coffee. With a muffin, you can also get orange juice. And with a muffin, you guys can get milk. So take a look at what we have here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total outcomes. And another way for us to do all of this without having to list everything off, although you might need to do that sometimes, is that take a look at this. In the very beginning, we had 3 options. In the second tier, like the second step, we also were able to choose from 3 options here. So if you take these 3 and multiply it by these other 3 options here, you'll notice it also equals to 9. Down here, for a tree diagram, a fair coin is tossed 3 times. So what they mean by a fair coin is that it only has a heads or a tails. So what are the possible outcomes that you could have, and how many total outcomes are possible? So in this example here, we're going to do a tree diagram. So it's being tossed 3 times. So let's think about the very first time it could happen. When you flip a coin, you're either going to get heads or you're going to get tails. Those are the only 2 options you can have with a fair coin. Now, let's take a look at our second time here. If you picked a heads on the very first one, the next option you can have is that you could either flip a heads again, or you can flip a tail. So if this is your first time, these are your 2 outcomes of what you can have the second time with heads. Same thing with tails. If you're flipping it a second time, you could either get heads again, or you can get tails. All right, so this is the second time that you're flipping a coin. Your third time that you are doing this, you're going back to one of the outcomes that you got for your second time. You're either getting a heads here or a tails here, because again, you're flipping a coin. Over here, tails, you could either get a heads or you can get tails here. Over here, if you did tails the first time and you got heads the second time, your options again are that you could either do a heads or a tail again, and same thing, heads or tails. Taking a look, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total outcomes that you can have. And going to the math again, what you can do is that take a look at the first round that you did. You had 2 options right here. In your second time that you did this, you pretty much only had 2 options again, either a heads or a tails. And going to number 3, again, you only have a heads or a tails again as your options. So that means if I do 2 times 2 times 2, that's going to get me 8 right here. So if you don't know how to do this mathematically right now, that's totally fine. You're either going to use a list or a table, or you're going to do a tree diagram to help you out.